Hello and welcome to the Assassinated Moment. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Brad Hathcock. Welcome to the morose edition of the El Mercenary Moment.
I am speechless, maybe. I continue to be speechless. About 48 hours ago, maybe a little more, somebody shot former President Trump in the head. I don't know, man. It's
And
crazy.
he only got the ear. He clipped the ear.
Well, the ear is
I would,
attached to something called the
yes, I would
head.
like to see the ear, like live on camera. But apparently Trump was like playing golf the next day, shit like that. Like he is kind of like championing like that shit. He's just like, yeah, I got shot in the ear, so what?
I I don't understand how stuff like this happens in history where Franz Ferdinand is almost killed in uh gosh, where was he? Sarajevo, almost killed by a terrorist, blown up, survives, decides he's going to go about his day like normal, happens to go down the wrong road that's really narrow, and the terrorist from earlier happened to see him and was able to kill Franz Ferdinand, thus setting off World War One. Right? Uh, Trump came probably an inch away from having his head blown off.
And even it was a matter of like millimeters, essentially, is
Millimeters.
what they're saying. And you're right. That's very true. Biden came out and said that we have to tamp down the rhetoric and like all this other stuff. But as much as what 2, 3 days ago, he was, saying Trump is a threat to democracy. And, that's just kind of been the narrative that they've been painting. And now everybody's like, Donald Trump is actually our friend. Like he's kind of a nice guy. Like, I mean, they're not coming out and saying that directly, but they're changing the rhetoric on it, and that just actually further shows that everything they do is fucking political theater,
Yeah.
and that they're all kind of the same. Republicans and Democrats are all the same. It's about keeping your position in power as long as possible. And not, they don't actually believe that democracy is on the ballot, even though people obviously keep saying that. It's definitely not true. If that were true, then Democrats wouldn't be allowed to, rig their primaries and like all the other shit that they've been doing. Um, what's interesting to see is now pretty much for the last, what, 2.5, 3 days, there is no more heat on Biden to drop out of the race. Like that's
Yeah,
all,
and
that's
I'm
all
sure
come
he's
full
happy about
circle.
that. I We should mention that there was a firefighter who basically covered up his family and saved them from being shot, and lost his life. And then there were two other guys who also got shot in the crowd. Um,
And as far as I know, they were both critically injured, right? But they're still alive. I haven't seen anything about either of them dying up to
no,
this
they're
point.
stable. That's what they've said. They're stable.
But Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, came out and had a very good press conference about the whole situation and named this guy. I think his forget it was like Comptor or something.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Yeah, Chris Comptor, I think was his name, and he was a firefighter and stuff like that. So he died saving his family, the best way he knew how, I guess, and that sucks. But Josh Shapiro definitely came out and had like a nice press conference for it, and um, started, saying that we need to tamp down the rhetoric. And I'll say this: I don't think he's ever. I'd have to go back and see, but he hasn't really engaged in a lot of that stuff. Even when he was running for governor, he was kind of running like a good guy campaign, really. Like, not really saying Republicans are a threat or anything like that. So I give him credit. There was talks about him potentially being a candidate to replace Biden on the ticket and everything. And it's like, again, I know him just because I'm in Pennsylvania, so he's my governor, and I don't really have any issues with him. I don't agree with all of his policies. Obviously, he's a politician, and I don't agree with pretty much any of their policies. But he he doesn't bother me the way that other ones do. So I would have supported that, and he showed why when he was given his press conference for sure.
Yeah, I thought Biden's was actually really bad. Because what he said was like, oh, there's all this bad stuff going on, and he did something I think that was a mistake, which is he tried to both sides it, but it's not a
Well,
both
yeah.
sides issue. Like, it's kind of only going one way. I mean, Rand Paul got beat up, and Steve Scalise got shot on that baseball field, and this assassination attempt on Trump, and it's only kind of happening one way. So then when he says, "Oh, and Gretchen Whitmer being kidnapped," it's like, well, that's not really what that was. Like, that was an FBI like sting trying to catch those guys doing something bad.
Well, and
But
they were
like,
set up.
they
That
were
was
set
an
up
FBI
so
setup. Like that was not even. They weren't even going to do that. They had no plan to do it. The FBI talked them into it and then arrested them.
like that's a really big difference between that and a kid getting up on a roof and shooting at Trump, the former
Right.
president.
Which they're saying this has been a large failure on the Secret Service, in the sense that that building was identified as a pivotal point of contention for this rally, and nobody covered it. They're deciding to blame local police for that. I'm seeing videos of the shooter like on top of the roof, and there's people yelling that there's a shooter up there and trying to tell police for upwards of 2 minutes that he was up there, and nothing gets done. One of the guys went on an interview and said, "Oh, the police just like looked at us," and we're like, "Huh?" and like did nothing about it. Um, the counter sniper group for the Secret Service was able to eliminate the threat within seconds.
But they
So
knew he was up there. They were
right.
watching him apparently and weren't given the go ahead to take the shot.
So what I was actually just listening to Sagar talk about this. They did not have to get a go ahead to take a shot.
Why would
They
they? That doesn't make any
right,
sense, right?
right, because in a split second, while you're waiting for that to happen, shots could come and obviously make contact. So it's definitely problematic. What was it? Speaker Mike Johnson said that they're gonna immediately start investigating the Secret Service and the head of the Secret Service and all these people, and it's just been a mass failure. The FBI is now heading the investigation on it, and they've said that this is a gross like a gross issue that they're now seeing like with Secret Service, and they don't understand how it could have happened. So it'll be interesting to see what more of the investigation returns. They're saying the shooter worked by himself, and the media is putting out, oh, he was a Republican, and but he also donated to Democratic causes and stuff, and people said he's apolitical. He used
This
to
is
get
what we do
bullied
now,
like every day. Yeah, and now you're basically just trying to determine whose side the shooter was on.
which is
Um,
bad. Like,
right.
that's not
And
going to
it
get
goes
anyone.
both ways. Like everyone's going to be doing that shit. So like if you want to both sides it, there you go. Like he's pretty apolitical. Um, but there's no doubt that the rhetoric goes into this situation, right? Because it's been 4 years and of people, even longer than that. It's been over 8 years of people saying Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and that he's going to be a dictator, all this other shit. It goes back to even when he was in office, the media portraying him like that. Um, some fucking asshole came out and said the devil doesn't need sympathy, and here we're giving it to him. Like right after, we were seeing a representative from Colorado delete their fucking Twitter account because some shit that they said about the assassination attempt. Like we're seeing a lot of like vitriol and stuff, which is not uncommon, I guess, and shouldn't, I guess, be that surprising.
I just like the reaction to it, that celebratory, like, oh shucks, if you only would have taken target practice or something, like To
Well,
me, that's
fucking
just really fucking weird.
Jack Black was on stage with Tenacious D and his like musical partner or whatever in that. He like brought out a cake, like a birthday cake for him on stage, and he goes, "Make a wish," and he goes, "I wish the guy would shoot better next time," or like wouldn't have missed, or something like that. Like, let's all remember that Alex Jones is getting had to like completely give up his entire business and everything for saying that Sandy Hook was fake and that they were like paid crisis actors. And now, dude, there have been conspiracy theories coming from the left, like
They're
completely
crazy, dude.
about that this is completely fake. A buddy of mine who is a leftist, I definitely won't bring his name into it, but I was talking to him about it, and he was like, all of these theories and shit like that. And it just, he was like, they're faking it. He's like, the videos look like they're faking it. He was like, no blood goes under, and he smears it all over his ear. He's like, the shooter said that he was on a roof like 300 yards away, not behind him. But he's like, it's odd that it missed his ear and it didn't hit the full stage of people behind him. It did. Like, it did.
These are
People
crazy.
died. And I was like, he was like, it just seems super fake to me. Um, he was like, no one in the extended video drops behind him. He's like, I thought conservatives were the conspiracy theorists. And I'm like, you're the conspiracy theorist and you're a fucking liberal. Like, this definitely happened.
Mine that I saw was that the bullet hit the teleprompter and the glass cut his ear. And A, that's not at all what happened, but B, what the fuck difference would it make?
Right.
Are you kidding me?
What,
Wow.
like, yeah, why does it, I mean, why does it really matter? But the fact of the matter is people did die and they took shots at Donald Trump. Again, unsurprisingly to me, given the height of political, I don't want to say political violence, but political tensions and everything in this country, that it's not that shocking to me.
Well, I sent you guys a post by Biden. There's a million of them. So I just grabbed the one. But, it said Donald Trump is deadly to this and deadly to that. There's stuff going out that said put him in the bullseye.
Yep.
Right? I'm not blaming Biden for any of this.
I think they deleted that. So
They
right
should.
after Biden suspended all like campaign ads against Donald Trump, I think, speaking out against him and everything. And I probably started scrubbing all of his social media of like anything negative that he said about Donald Trump to the best that they can. But people have long memories in this regard. Like, the internet is forever. So people have seen what has been said already, and we know this. Like, he's definitely done it. And not to say that, Trump hasn't had negative rhetoric. I mean, he said, "Oh, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it." Like, so that all the rhetoric, and then tying into basically like after the immunity case in the Supreme Court went, and everyone, was freaking out that he's basically going to be a king, and like you're seeing all that rhetoric and shit like that, and then he's so much higher in the polls than Joe Biden. Somebody decided to just take the matters into their own hands, I guess.
Oh, we know like very little about, and you know what? I hate to even say this, but we still don't know anything behind the Vegas shooter. We never will. We don't know who leaked the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. We never will. It wouldn't surprise me if we don't get any actual answer to any of this about this guy that shot at him.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me either. Shit, it's pretty much widely considered now that JFK was killed by the CIA, and they still have classified docs related to JFK's assassination. So,
I'll never buy into that one, but I will say that one's got the most evidence behind it, I suppose.
I mean, that's pretty widely accepted as a
Not
no
in,
longer a
not to me.
conspiracy theory.
I mean, there's elements. Let's not get off topic. I do want to say that, like, it's been like 40 years since Reagan got shot, and like we went through a time where there was no violence, like political violence, and I don't know, when people celebrate him getting shot, it's like you don't want to live in that world. Like in 1968, Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. both were assassinated. It was not fun, right? Margaret Thatcher almost got killed. The Pope John Paul II almost got killed. Um, Gerald Ford was almost killed like twice in a 17-day span. Um, these were like not good times in America. So, I mean, assassinations have always been a thing in America. It's a violent country, right? But it's not something that like you should celebrate or idolize because history could have changed drastically on Saturday, and this
Sure.
stuff could happen now. I mean, look, I'm going to say this again. Like the right hasn't like outwardly shown that like they're willing to do things that are like violent against their political enemies. They're not out in the streets burning everything down like in Kenosha or DC or whatever, right? But that could change any day. I don't know. I mean, it's just like when they said they blame Trump for his rhetoric, right? Yeah, Trump has always used bad rhetoric. He says bad things a lot. But now everybody's doing it too. It's different than it was because now everybody's doing it. And so everybody's coming out and calling Trump a fascist. Trump's
Sure.
a lot of things. He's not a fascist. He's like all these words matter. And if you're gonna say he's the worst thing ever, and you're gonna put him on the front of your magazine with a Hitler mustache, then people are gonna fucking take it seriously.
Right.
And that's what's happening. It's crazy. He's
But
not
that's
Hitler.
right, but that's why you're seeing them like saying to tamp down the rhetoric, and that they are now showing their hand that basically everything they said was false. So now going forward for the Biden campaign, you can't use that as rhetoric. You
No.
can't sit here and call him a dictator and like all this shit's going to happen. You just lost all of your talking points against Donald Trump. Like you did, because you had to come out and condemn this. If you didn't, you're even more fucked than you already are. And
Yeah.
so you've now had to come out and say like nice things and that he's a friend and all this other shit. When at the debate you guys wouldn't even shake hands, like all this shit, and now you lose every talking point that you had against Donald Trump.
Remember what I told you? I've said it a couple times that Trump has the ability to make his enemies stoop down as low as he's willing to go. This is another perfect example of that. Where now they hate him so much and they'll say such horrible shit that Morning Joe, the 4-hour morning show that covers the news during one of the biggest news events of the last 40 years, they can't even put the show on the air because they are
Yeah.
afraid of what those people will say. And they'll
Right.
say crazy shit. They'll say a lot of people are saying, he had this coming because the skirt was too short and he had it coming because he talks a lot of shit. And I disagree, man. Like, I think you should be able to say whatever the fuck you want and not have to suffer, not to be shot in the fucking head. Like, at some
Yeah,
point,
I
these
I
people believe
agree.
this.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I mean is like Donald Trump won the day that day, right? Like he could have paid a grave price, but he paid a very minimal price to pretty much guarantee he wins this election. He was already up on ballots, everything, because of everything going on with the Democrats and Joe Biden, that he wants Joe Biden to stay in the race for sure because he thinks it's going to be an easy win. But now that the Democrats have had to backtrack on every negative thing that they've said about Donald Trump, and they showed that their hand was a complete fucking bluff with this whole democracy on the ballot shit, they are fucked. There's
Yeah,
no way. They
yeah.
also just a poll came out, and they actually had to go back and fix it. I think it might have been CNN, showed that Biden was up 3 points on Donald Trump. Well, here the polling people that gave them the data fucked up the top page, which is where they basically grab everything from for,
Yeah, it
their
happens
thing.
sometimes.
And it was
Yeah.
actually that Donald Trump was ahead of Joe Biden by 3 points.
Yeah.
So, he's running away with the thing. And now I think he's really just has it in his back pocket at this point. Especially he did just announce his VP pick of JD Vance, who used to be a big critic of Donald Trump. So I
I think
mean,
you could find anybody in Washington, and they've all probably said something negative about Trump. So I can't say that that surprises me. I don't know. I told you guys the pick was interesting. I don't want to get off topic and go talk about him because I don't really. We don't live in Ohio. I don't know much about him besides that he wrote Hillbilly Elegy and he, used to. I think he lived in San Francisco. He was part of the venture capital community with like Peter Thiel and all those guys, David Sachs. But he has one thing going for him that nobody else has going for them right now. He's 39 years old. He's a young man. So, these parties are just, they're full of old people. And to get somebody elevated to that position who's as young as he is, I think is probably a good thing. He's not young, he's 39, right? Like, I mean, that's young in terms of politicians, but
well, kind of remember how we were saying there's nobody after these two really that I think people would see as viable candidates.
or the
Um,
future of the party.
right. So I think this is Trump's way of dragging somebody into that, right? Without naming his kids, which we had talked about before. We thought they would kind of be the next batter up when it comes to
Well,
running the Republican Party.
Brad, just so you know, Don Jr. is apparently really good friends with JD Vance. So
No, that doesn't shock me.
the kids are involved in some capacity.
So right, it's a way to keep your kids out of the spotlight, but still giving them power, right? Because JD Vance, and I think Trump definitely looks at this as like he could maybe not be alive like while he's in office, barring obviously something happening, which is obviously something's happening. People are trying to kill him. Um, so he picks a guy that he doesn't mind handing the reins over to, that is good friends with his son, that can kind of listen and basically be another Donald Trump if that happens. But he's more well spoken and a little bit smarter than Donald Trump. So
Yeah, he I don't agree with his policies, or I don't really agree with. I don't even like him. I don't really care, but vice presidents we know don't really matter. The only time they ever mattered was when Harry Truman found out we had the bomb, right? And it's like, oh, a vice president finally mattered. But in general, they really don't. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting. But back to the rhetoric for a moment, because that's all that the people on TV were saying. I think Jen Psaki had the most absurd line. She said something like, we have to be really careful in this climate because it could get a journalist killed. It's like,
yeah,
it was like 24 hours after the president got shot at, and it's like these people are out of their fucking minds. They just, I don't know why they think it's a winning strategy for them to blame him for his what he says got him shot. And it's like, you guys all sound insane. You guys have been calling him a Russian plant for 4 years, and then you switched over to he's literally Hitler for the other
right.
four. Like, why are you surprised? Like, why? It's not him anymore. It's everybody.
I don't think anybody should be surprised that this happened. It's real funny because like I was talking to my mom about January 6th and stuff, and she's like, it's really embarrassing that something like that would happen in this country. And I said, why? We do that to other countries all the time and orchestrate coups and shit like that in other countries. That's more embarrassing. But the fact that it can happen here shouldn't be that embarrassing. That's kind of how fucking it got started in the first place, right? So you have to look at it in context. Now, like we saw what Abo get assassinated. Just he ended up dying, right?
Shinzo Abe.
Shinzo Abe, yeah.
Yeah, he died.
He ended up dying. How many other
I.
assassination
You know
attempts have
what?
we had? Apparently, Netanyahu, I think, has dodged a couple like assassination attempts and stuff pretty recently in Israel as well.
I'm sure Javier Malay's probably had something happen at some point, and they maybe didn't
Probably.
talk about it.
He would wear that like a badge of honor.
Yeah. I also when people come out and they amp their fear up to 11 and they say stuff like, the end of democracy or fascism in America. I mean, this country has been through so many ebbs and flows, like I said, the 60s or like the 20s or like the 1860s.
Or even
Like,
even what the 80s and 90s with Russians and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, like,
remember how they had like Russian spies living here in America and all this other stuff, and like people hated Russians, during the Cold War and everything else. Like, you're right. It's kind of almost like at every like 20 to 30-year span, we get something like pretty ridiculous like this.
yeah, or 9/11, right? Like, so yeah, I'm not voting for either of these men, and I'm not going to. I cannot be convinced, but I also don't clutch my pearls and fear for the nation because a guy who was in Home Alone 2 is going to be reelected president. It's not. It's just so overblown. Now there are consequences to that. So if you want Joe Biden to be your guy, and Joe Biden he no longer believes himself to be a bridge candidate now. He's the guy. He thinks he's the only one who can win. Then you're accept the loss and the consequences there within. You'll lose another seat on the Supreme Court because Sotomayor is not going to give up her spot for somebody younger. You're you're going to face consequences down the road. Consequences I like when it comes to judicial rulings, but you know, and they're going to focus on the Senate and the House now. That's where they're at. They're worried about losing the Senate and the House. So
Well,
okay,
and they should be,
they
because
should be.
it as they were actually talking about this. Most people don't split ballot vote. Okay, they like, ever since they added that button to like down ticket vote, everybody pretty much just down ticket votes. So if you're not having split ballots and people truly don't think that Biden can do the job, you might see Republicans win quite a bit, like here, because people don't
Yeah,
trust Biden, and the polling is so low for him. Like,
actually,
Democrats have almost no choice but to replace him, but they kind of aren't, right? They said, oh well, during this press conference we'll see, but then he said, after the Trump assassination attempt, I think it was yesterday, he said, we settle things at the battle box. Not even the ballot box, the battle box.
just the worst possible gaffe to make.
Right. I mean, of all things, yes. Well, I don't know, because I was watching Fox News just because I was like catching up on some of the stuff I had missed, and like right after their like Trump assassination attempt, and then they're showing like a pro gun commercial. It's
Oh,
like,
awesome.
well,
Yeah.
that's kind of for context here. Like, you probably shouldn't do that, but
Yeah, I was looking at some polling before we got on, and it actually showed that I think the Democratic senatorial candidates are all leading in their respective races around the country, and all while Biden is that low. So it's totally possible that this is actually a good year for the Democrats in the Senate, and that wouldn't surprise me. Like, I actually don't mind when the government is divided by party. Like, I don't want a unified party controlling all three or both the House, the Senate, and
right.
the executive. So I'm fine
Well,
with that. I don't
well,
care.
that's why I like Pennsylvania politics, and why we're largely considered a battleground state. We have a Republican legislature, but we have a Democratic governor, and they do have to work hand in hand to do things and actually legislate shit. But it is tough because a Democrat governor is going to try to veto probably as much as he can. But they've done some good things here in Pennsylvania. They're finally changing like the laws here about alcohol, and like now you'll be able to buy vodka based cocktails in beer distributors and grocery stores, which you couldn't before, because we have the state run like liquor and shit. So, it can work. And I would say it's probably good on a national scale, but we hardly ever see it.
It's uncommon. Um, I don't really know if there's much else to discuss about the assassination attempt. I just mentioned to you guys that I struggle with the idea that even happened. It's just really fucking wild. It's hard to believe.
It is actually pretty hard to believe. There's just
He
a
got
mass
shot.
scale of like fucked up shit that has happened in this. Like it's hard to even verbalize exactly what I mean. Like there was
COVID.
failures all over the place in this
Oh,
situation.
yes, in this one,
Like
yeah.
I texted you and Superfan, and I said, why don't they have like an entire square mile, like blocked off for this? And
Yeah.
it's true, like there is reduced Secret Service support and everything like that for former presidents and everything. But this is one of the most divisive candidates we've ever had. He was already president. I I think that they need to ramp up the security, and I'm sure they are now. Senator or Mayorkas or whatever just
Oh,
actually gave Secret Service protection to Robert Kennedy Jr.
can I mention Marcus really quick? I think he came out and said that there's going to be a long investigation into what happened. I was like, no, motherfucker. This should be the quickest, most in-depth investigation to ever occur because this can never happen again. This isn't. I think Marcus was on like CNN this morning and he said something like, this can't happen. It's like it happened.
Well, the head of the Secret Service is a woman. I think first ever woman. She's going to lose her job now.
She
You
is friends with Joe
cannot keep
Biden.
her on. You
Joe
cannot keep
Biden
her on.
Joe Biden got her that job. She used to work. She was the person who oversaw the security for PepsiCo. Did you know that?
Oh, because that's the same thing.
Yeah. Did you know that? I only
I
found
did
that
not
out
know
because I
that.
looked her up and I was like, who the fuck is this person? Yeah, she was just friends of the family or whatever.
She absolutely cannot keep her job.
Nobody
She
gets
she
fired
has
anymore,
she has
Brad.
to go.
I
But
know, but nobody gets
that
fired
is one of
anymore.
the fucking things that Donald Trump said to Joe Biden. He said, "You don't fire anybody."
Yeah, it's
And,
true.
well, he has to now. Imagine being the president and a former president is
Shot
almost
on your watch.
assassinated, shot on your watch, and you don't get rid of the fucking person that is responsible for overseeing that entire agency. No way, dude. That's going to be so politically unpopular if he does not fire her.
She was at a conference in Aspen, Colorado, man. Like how embarrassing. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, Biden was in Rehoboth Beach.
yeah,
So
well, I have no expectation for him, but also we should mention that he actually gave that speech from the Oval Office. That was probably the first time I've seen him in the Oval Office. He spends no time there, and I think the part why he was looking at the ceiling because that's where the teleprompter was. Well, apparently there's not a lot of room in the Oval Office, and when they set up these teleprompters, they have to make the text really big, which is why he doesn't give a lot of speeches from that room. And you could see why, because they have them all kind of around him, and he looks like he's kind of out of it. I just thought that was an interesting observation.
I
But
was pretty sure that it's because they couldn't try to get a vat of baby blood that he bathes in into the White House without people noticing. But he
under the
already had
table,
it at Rehoboth.
under the resolution desk, the resolute desk. Um, I was going to say one other thing. Oh, he didn't fire Jake Sullivan after the Afghanistan withdrawal, and in my opinion, that was the one time you'd want to fire somebody. So he didn't fire him then, and you know that press conference he gave was really bad. He's a bajillion years old. He's getting worse, and they've
I'll be
just
interested to
accepted their
see how
fate.
it shakes out in in the next couple of weeks, especially if he has like more gaffes, because they have to do something. I mean, the
We were right.
Republican National Convention started today. The Democratic
Yeah,
National Convention will be
1
coming, and
month.
they have to make that decision. And I mean,
They made their decision.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
we said
I
80% he'll
think
be on the
he's there.
ballot. We were
Yeah,
right. He's not going to give it up, and he doesn't want to give it up, and his family doesn't want him to give it up. Today he announced a 5% rent cap, and I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? I don't even know what that means. 5% of what?
I would imagine that you wouldn't be able to be charged more than 5% of your income for rent. I guess that's what that would mean. I don't know.
It's so
Like look at what he
incoherent.
did with student loans. With the save plan, they like capped it at, it used to be like 10% of your discretionary income, and they reduced it to 5% of your discretionary income. So it would save people like hundred up to $1,200 a year basically on your payments.
I have no problem with that, honestly. I just,
But how you
you know,
can't do that? How do you do that for rent? Like you can do it
yeah,
on loans that you hand out from the federal
national.
government, which is what you do. But yeah, trying to do this on a national scale, uh, that's not going to fly.
It,
That will not pass the Supreme Court, guaranteed.
it doesn't even make sense in my brain. He said it at the press conference, and I was like, what? Like, he just kind of threw it out there, but I guess it was actually not misspoken. It was a policy. I just found that to be truly bizarre, and it's like
Well, he's
this is.
releasing all these things to try and get voters back into,
Oh,
because
we
one of
should
the
talk
big,
about the student
yeah.
loan one.
So one of the big things that people care about is obviously being able to afford rent and be able to pay your student loans, all this other stuff. So announcing that you're going to create an executive order for this, you sure as shit know that it will not pass the Supreme Court. You know that for a fact. You're saying it to basically just like pander to people. And this is going to be their new thing moving forward, because they can't sit here, as we said, and use the same rhetoric that they were using against Donald Trump. You can't call him a threat to democracy. You can't call him Hitler. You can't do all this other stuff now because somebody tried to kill him. And you have to do something else. So you're gonna fucking lie about all the policies. You're gonna sit like Biden already did it at the debate, I think, where he was like, oh, something about, where he always talks about, Roe v. Wade and all this other stuff. Well, you're the president now. You don't have to get reelected to help with, restoring Roe if that's what you're trying to do. You can do that now. But you're not.
Yeah,
You're not
that's
even trying to do that. You're
you know
lying,
what?
saying that you have to vote for me in order for it to happen, and that's bullshit because they're not going to do anything about it.
I'm glad you brought that up because he had this thing about like here's my blueprint for my second term. It's like you can do it now.
Yeah.
You're the
Oh yeah.
president right now.
You're right now. You are the president, and you aren't going to do anything about it. And what they'll say is, "Oh, well, the House." Well, the House just actually voted to make it so that you have to be a U.S. citizen to register to vote. And you have to like show, I think, citizenship or something like that to be able to register to vote.
I
Only
think it was even
five,
simpler than that.
oh yeah, something. Only five Democrats crossed the aisle to vote for it and make sure it passed. Five.
Bizarre.
Like, of course you should be a fucking U.S. citizen to vote. It's part of the Constitution.
Also, I want to, before I forget, mention that his Secretary of Education sent out an email to everybody who has a student loan. And in that email, he violated the Hatch Act, I think, because he wrote it politically. He said the Republicans are
Yep.
preventing us from forgiving your student debt. Boy, that is very offensive as a taxpayer. I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't believe they did that.
I try to ignore it because obviously, like, I have to go on and check my student loans and all this other stuff because I have an abundance of them. Um, but you're right. It did come through, and it's like Republicans. And as soon as I saw Republicans in there, I was like, I'm not even fucking reading this. It's bullshit. I obviously don't agree with student loan forgiveness in the first place, but like, you can't politicize that. Like, you can't put a note on my fucking student loans to tell me that it was Republicans' fault. That's bullshit. I shouldn't have to
It's
tolerate that
Yeah, it's the
because you don't know
one
my political affiliation.
right. It's the one email group that they have in the federal government, because you don't have an email listing for any other thing, but you do have it if you have student loans, and that was a direct call to action by people who are borrowers, and it's strictly political. And I was so fucking offended by that.
Yeah, I have a huge problem with that because you are putting a political agenda on my finances, basically. And
It's an apolitical subject.
right,
We all
like
have the loans.
right. So many people have student loans. So many of them are Republicans. So many of them are Democrats. So many of them are independents. Like, it doesn't matter. You can't sit here and play the blame game. The fact of the matter is, you couldn't get it done. That just means you can't get the votes. Like,
And
that's what
they're
that
never going to admit to
means.
that.
No, of course they're not going to admit
No
to it because
accountability.
it's easier to just blame your opponent than to actually take responsibility. Be like, you know what, we tried to negotiate and we just couldn't get the votes. It means you didn't negotiate hard enough, maybe. Like, I government unfortunately is a business. Okay, it is, and Donald Trump always ran it as a business, and that's just kind of the way that you have to see things. I mean, they stonewall, everybody stonewalls, but they're just, I don't know, like, keep that
I
shit
don't
out of my face.
I don't think we have accepted or appreciated the fact that when it looks increasingly more likely every day Trump wins the presidency, that the Democrats who have already lost their shit for 8 years are gonna actually start facing real consequences from that, especially with the Supreme Court. And they're absolutely fucked. They've been trying to lay the groundwork for a while now, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't step aside, and it changed everything. Like, it changed the course of all law in the United States. So
Yeah, I
I
think you're
they're
right about that.
they're
I
playing with they're playing with fire because they're going to deal with something in 2 years, and they're not going to have the ability to stop it. And it's going to be because they ran Joe Biden and they didn't hold him accountable. For three
right,
and a half years, they didn't hold him
but
accountable.
that comes even full circle back to like the rhetoric that they used, because it's always been threat to democracy, but you don't look at the person you're running and the polls and everything as a threat to democracy. The cognitive decline and everything that he has shown should be enough to invoke the 25th Amendment, which, again, we talked about would be perfect for Kamala Harris. Like, that's a dagger in the back, but and that's showing that you are the head of the Democratic Party. If you went in ahead and did that, it's a soft coup inside the government, right?
Yeah, I'm the
Like,
captain now.
yeah, yeah, basically, look at me. I'm the captain now. Like, that would be it. And it would be a soft coup, but it would be one that I think people would sign up on. And now they have to look at it this way because of the assassination attempt. I do feel like it seals it for Trump. So if they want any shot, they have to run anybody. The problem is, nobody is willing to go up there knowingly that they're going to lose, because it will fuck up every single prospect they have to get elected going forward. Which even more goes to show that you don't actually care about democracy. You don't care about the state of the country. You are in it for yourself.
Of course, and thank you very much, Democrats, because you just proven that you are no different than the Republicans. The Republicans gave that party to Donald Trump. They now have no power over it. It's all his, and they did the same thing. It's just like, gotta give it to Biden. Let Biden run the show then.
Right. And now, Democrats are going to just keep pushing the whole Project 2025 thing, for Donald Trump, saying that this is his platform and all this other
Even
stuff.
though
And
it's not.
they were talking about it on Bill Maher on Friday, obviously before the assassination attempt and everything.
It's not
Trump
gonna
has
work, Brad.
distanced
I
himself from
Yeah.
Project 2025 on a number of occasions. I Everyone's like, well, it's written by the Heritage Foundation, and they're like a large Republican donor group. Sure, that doesn't mean anything. It's like their wish list of shit to happen.
Also, they published it too, or like almost 2 years ago. Like, it's not even a new document. It's been
No,
out
they
there.
they just drummed it up so
Yeah.
that they're like, oh, okay, well, this is like something that we can use. because
Okay, good luck to
they didn't
you.
have enough. That's what
Yeah.
they've been digging up more and more dirt because they're losing in the polls and they know it. So they need
Well,
something
yeah.
else to show as like he's a threat.
Well, they tell you look it up. Google Project 2025.
Right.
Nobody's gonna Google Project 2025 because if you go look at the fucking thing, it's like 96 pages long.
I think it's more than that. I think it's like
It might
100.
be more than that
I
even.
think it's
Like,
like almost 200. I don't know. Ben
good.
Shapiro was joking about it with Bill Maher and vice versa. So I don't know exactly how many pages it is, but I mean, there's
We'll
some
talk
shit
about it
on
another
there.
time.
Yeah,
I don't want to talk about
but
it today because I haven't looked at it, but
that's that's what they're pushing now. Like that's gonna be their narrative going forward, and it has to be because
you know what,
you
Brad? It won't work. I think it lasts another week or two, maybe
it
even less,
can't.
maybe after the RNC.
It can't. I'm interested to see what happens at the DNC because they could still technically run a contested DNC, and a lot of the donor class and stuff like that are like there was one big donor that was like, well, we have 90 million of funds that we're sitting on, and we are taking those pledges back, and we will not release that money until Biden is off the ticket. It's 90 million. I
That's
mean,
a
it's
lot
just
of
a
fucking
drop in the
money.
bucket, really, when it comes to these things. Which I think the thing that people overlook and nobody ever fucking talks about this is everybody wants to be able to say, well, we should increase our taxes to pay for X, Y, Z, all this other stuff. If we spent the money that these PACs gave for like to presidents for campaigning, it would do so much more good than having to deal with one of the fucking morons that gets into office. Like
Yeah,
you want to sit here and bitch and say taxpayers should pay more because we need to help everybody. How about all the fucking money in politics? Like get that out of here. I'd be
I'll do
interested to
one
see
more.
like almost average cost of for both parties combined on what they spend on an election.
Yeah, I would go one step further and say like all these people that donate their small dollar donations to politicians, like that $10 could do something else in your life, and you're throwing it away on a politician. Like I think the whole thing is fucking gross.
Right. Politicians we know don't care about you. You're just you're a vote to them. You're a number. They don't actually care about you. It's why they all fucking lie. And then when they get into office, they change their tune. Like Obama lied about whistleblowers and everything, and then he continued to try and prosecute and pursue uh, Assange.
Whistleblowers and
Yeah,
journalists.
right. I mean, we all know that Obama kicked Fox News out of the room or something like that. Some conservative journalists like banned their station or something like that. I mean,
Yeah, I'm told that's an attack on democracy.
right, but that's what I'm saying. Like this shit's been happening forever. It's
Yeah.
not gonna stop. And we just keep doing the cycle thing. It's why I've always pushed a third party. I don't even believe in the libertarian candidate this year. I don't trust his policies and thoughts on things and stuff like that. But we still need more parties in this country, or we're going to continue down this path, and it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. So like I was reading, there was like an article that came out. Um, I think his name was like Dan McGovern or McCormick or something like that. I think he's actually running in Pennsylvania.
Oh
And
yes.
he put out this article that said we were like an inch away from catastrophe because, and he was kind of taking a look at like, the last three elections and all of the political rhetoric that has just been ramped up constantly over and over again. And it stronger and stronger every election cycle. And like, what would have happened, what kind of fucking chaos, and I'm actually looking for your opinion on this, what kind of chaos do you think would have ensued had Trump actually gotten killed?
Oh man,
What, come on,
I've
the
thought about this a
RNC just, or
lot.
yeah, the RNC just started. What the fuck happens at that convention? Because it's not like you've been talking about getting rid of him. He didn't have a VP pick. So who the fuck do you, like, what do you do at the RNC? Because you're out of time. You would have had to turn around and just thrown somebody up there. Like,
Yeah, I don't know because I'm not somebody who's passionate about a political figure and a party. It's not my sports team. But I would imagine the people who are Republicans, who are on that sports team, who find him to be like their team, I think that they would have. I think things would have escalated in this country on the right in a way that they haven't. Although people like to
Yeah.
pretend and say like these alt right people are violent, they have their guns, they're going to go do this or that. It doesn't really happen or materialize. It really doesn't. And I think that probably would have happened, and that would have been bad for the country. Um,
Yeah,
because for
it would have been chaotic, but that's what I'm saying is like what would have come from the chaos? Like,
I think the left's version, the right would have done what the left's been doing for the past 5 years. Whether it's in Kenosha, it's a BLM riot, it's a pro Gaza, pro Hamas protest every weekend, Charlottesville protest every weekend. It would have been that, but it would have been on the right. And I think that that didn't happen, but that's probably what would happen.
yeah, I don't. It's just wild to see, and I know we've obviously just been kind of talking about this, but it's such a huge event in our lifetime. Um,
It would have
that
given a lot of people the permission structure to do whatever the fuck they want because they right now follow the rules. You know, the right doesn't go out and harass people on the streets. They just don't do that.
right.
But they probably would have.
You know what's kind of funny? Like thinking back to George Bush, even like remember he dodged that shoe. Like I sent
Yeah.
you that meme where he was just like, and then he gets up and kind of like laughs at the guy, and then like dodges
Mm-hmm.
another shoe. Like that was chaotic. But like I don't recall it seeing like anybody throw shit at Obama or like during
No,
press conferences or
that's the
anything like
problem,
that.
Brad. Everybody always acted like Obama was on the cusp of assassination because of his skin color. And that's just not what the country was like. It really wasn't. And then they tried to make Mitt Romney to be this like superhero villain who put a dog on his car and he had a binder full of women. And the 1980s called and they want their foreign policy back. And Biden himself said he's going to put you all back in chains, you know? And that's how they talked about Mitt fucking Romney.
Right. And then as so again, like high political like rhetoric against your opponent. Um I mean, don't get me wrong, there was always like Donald Trump with the lock her up thing, which he didn't do. So if Trump is anything, he's a liar and hasn't done all the things he wanted to do. Like he said he was going to drain the swamp, but he hired people like John Bolton and shit who are the swamp to work in his cabinet. I wonder how different that will look next time around. I mean, JD Vance, like we said, is kind of like an interesting selection for vice president because it ushers in like this new kind of like level of Republican, I guess. He's pretty well educated, smart guy. So we'll have to kind of see what that looks like in these next few years.
It's all populism, and Biden's doing it now too with this 5% rent thing. They're both being populist. We're in a populist moment. JD Vance is a populist.
But
These are where the parties have gone.
But so people have been calling that out for like a long time of populism, but they're doing it themselves. But
Yeah,
they won't call it populism.
I don't like populism.
It's just like the whole like government officials being able to trade on the stock market. Like if you worked in a corporation and did that, it's insider trading. But if you're a government official and you do it, it's just fine
Yeah,
because you're just a normal person, but you're actively regulating these businesses.
I don't know, man. I you know I can't believe how close that was. Matter of seconds, matter of inches, matter of like the smallest possible measurements to completely change the course of a moment in history. It's like we do with this podcast, and when we're done, we kind of just like go do our own thing. And it's really like we're not going to go out and like be a part of any sort of like political movement, but there are places in the country where that does happen, and it just makes you wonder. That's
Oh
all.
yeah, I mean, I was in Penn State a couple months ago for a concert, and there was Free Palestine rally going like through campus and like, downtown Happy Valley or whatever you want to call it there, which is just like the town and where all the businesses are next to the college. But there was, a whole Free Palestine rally going on there. Like, I'm not fucking going to rallies and all this other shit, because at the end of the day, I despise all politicians. They all suck. Like,
I yeah.
we're stuck with this bullshit. I
I
mean,
really wish people would stop paying attention to the presidency as if it matters to them.
the president should have such little power, and this is a libertarian view, I guess, that he almost doesn't matter. Like, you shouldn't really know who he is,
That's
because
why that's what the Calvin Coolidge argument. Calvin Coolidge came in and nobody really, the guy was just kind of like, I'll make the government run and you just don't have to worry about me at all. And they didn't. That's what makes him a great president.
right, the biggest threat to democracy is actually Congress punting all of their power to the executive branch. You
Well
know,
put.
like Bill Maher and Ben Shapiro. I forget who the other guests they had on this black guy. I can't remember what he does though, and he might have been a journalist. And they were talking about the Chevron deal, and like, all that does is strip power from agencies that aren't elected. Like,
Yeah,
that's what that does. And
that's
he
why the
he was
left
like,
got pissed.
this is a problem. Like, this is going to be bad for Americans. Why? Because Congress actually has to legislate and do their fucking job, and maybe they shouldn't be on vacation 180 days out of the year. Like,
Yeah.
maybe that.
I
Let's talk
mean,
about that. I mean, the
we
Elizabeth
learned
Warren.
nothing from COVID.
No, Elizabeth Warren was sitting out here bitching, saying that the Fed needs to regulate these banks, and it's like, no, that's your job. Your job is writing regulation. It's like pretty much in your fucking job description. That is your job description. Write legislation and pass legislation, and you can't even do that. You're saying that the Fed has to do it. Come on, like,
Yeah,
that's why the Chevron doctrine was like, it's so good that they overturned that, because it actually requires Congress to do its job.
that's why I said that it's a bigger deal than all the other stuff they've done because it was the last
Right.
big hurdle to like individual rights and liberty.
Right. And, Democrats keep railing against the Supreme Court overturning Roe and all this other stuff. Well, you've had multiple supermajorities in government, and the government never codified Roe, did they? No, because they don't want to. And they don't want to because they lose a talking point. It's like the dog that catches the car. What do you do? What do you do? If Democrats actually passed a law to legalize abortion when they had the supermajorities, they wouldn't have anything to fucking campaign against Republicans on.
And you know what? The Republicans are the dog that caught the car because they now got what they wanted, and now they're the ones who are struggling with the abortion issue at the
Right.
state level.
Well, yeah, because, these red states have started passing pro abortion laws and stuff like that. And so that's why this works. Like, that's the Constitution at at its best. It's working. And I was trying to explain that to a leftist friend of mine, and he goes, "Well, I don't agree." And I'm like, you do realize that there have been more abortions now than there were pre-Roe, and they're just harder to get. And the Democratic stance has always been safe, legal, and rare, and now it's not.
What is somebody? How does somebody like that respond?
They don't have a response. They're just like, well, I don't agree. Well, it doesn't matter if you agree. These are facts. So you either don't agree on the facts, in which case there's no conversation to be had, or you just ignore it, which is pretty much what they're doing.
Well, I told you this that the right is better at talking about the left in its own terms than the left is about the right because the left really doesn't understand the right. This is why they fail to understand that the Supreme Court conservatives don't always agree in lockstep on every decision.
Right.
To them, it's like, how is that possible? Because the liberal justices always agree together. Like it's just that they cannot figure it out or understand it. Whereas the right does know how the left feels about abortion or what they
Right.
think about, any number of issues, right? So it's just interesting to see that dynamic play out.
I mean, go back and look at the decisions that they've made ever since, like, you know, Donald Trump started putting justices on there. Um, it's been pretty even.
Neil
It like
Gorsuch
it
is
really
like, you
has.
never know where he's going to come down on anything.
No, and I was actually a big fan of his going in because
Yeah.
his decisions on things have always been pretty much right in the middle. And then they tried to paint him to be this like super corporatist, like right wing, protectionist, like kind of judge. And that just is not the fucking case. And it never has been. I saw an article the other day. It was like Amy Coney Barrett's having her moment. And like, I didn't read it because I don't care.
Well, it's about
But
the
like,
immunity case because
yeah.
she disagreed with them about how far that immunity should go. Because John Roberts is very interested about preserving presidential power, but not. I guess it's hard for me to explain it in a way that I was able to understand it. But she disagreed with them.
Right. Well, they actually were just talking about this on Bill Maher, and because Justice Sotomayor took her decision to, and her dissent to like the nth degree, and
Oh yeah,
basically were like, this makes it so that a president can assassinate their political rivals.
is that an
And
official duty? She can't explain
right,
why.
and
If it
that's
is,
just not true. And Ben
yeah,
Shapiro like went off and actually
I'll have to watch
like
this.
ripped Bill Maher and this other guy apart. And he's like, that's just not true. He's like, it was broken into these three sections, and he just starts like rattling this other stuff off, and they're just like, and it's like, yeah,
Ben
well,
Shapiro's a lawyer, dude.
yeah, and that's he said, he's like, from a law perspective, here's like XYZ, like all this other stuff, and they just could not accept it. And literally, I think the journalist guy was just like, oh no, that just means he's basically a king and shit. It's like, that's not what this is. Like, it's not what it is. And I disagree. I don't think presidents should have any form of immunity whatsoever, because they're supposed to, you know, nobody's supposed to be above the law. So don't get me wrong. It does make the president above the law to an extent, but they're taking it to an nth degree that it doesn't need to go to, talking about fucking like poor rhetoric and all this other stuff. Like, that's poor rhetoric, and it's written down on a fucking piece of law, like letterhead.
Well, that's why I said Ketanji Brown Jackson is actually kind of becoming a better writer over time. Sotomayor is purely emotional. That's all it is.
Oh, I
And
know,
so
she
she's saying
cries. She
she
cries in some of
cries.
these cases. She cries.
Um,
So sad.
yeah, and like,
You have to do your
God.
job. You have to do your job. That's really
So
sad.
one nice thing about this moment is that rhetoric. I'm going to stop using that word because it's going to drive me crazy. But they're going to stop talking like that because you're not going to go. Biden should drone strike Trump. Like, I mean, that you've basically lost that now. So I don't know. I hope that by the end of all this, we just kind of like stop talking about the end of the fucking world over a fucking election.
I don't know. We're gonna find out, buddy.
We are. I had nothing else to talk about today, so that's kind of all that's been on my mind. I'm
Okay.
still kind of reeling from the images.
I know, it
I
was a
can't.
crazy weekend. I was literally like 10 or 15 minutes from where the rally was taking place and the assassination
I
attempt took
saw that.
place. It was very close to where I was. So it was kind of interesting. It wasn't like crazy or anything like that around. Um, But it was
We
interesting to see CBS had in real time their headline changed because it was like something about like a firecracker or whatever, and then it went to like the Trump falls on stage thing, and it kind of like progressed over time until they got it right. But it's like they just wanted to fucking be first and not be
yeah.
right. Like, and
Well, if you want to get a little bit more information on what it was like there, Selena Zito is sort of like she's like the Trump campaign's like journalistic conduit. Kind of, she's got like she knows everybody. She talks to Trump, and she was 4 feet away from the stage. And on honestly, with Barry Weiss, that podcast, they had did an episode Sunday with her asking questions about what that was like. And then she also put out an article today where she did interview Trump, and he did talk about how that affected him and how it's continuing to affect him, because I think he's probably feeling the same way I am, which is like, did that actually happen? Like, it
Well,
felt
he
like
was
it wasn't
actually
real.
shot.
Yeah. And so, it's interesting to hear him talk about it as well. So if listeners are interested or anything,
I'm gonna
it's
check that
interesting.
one out. Barry Weiss.
Yeah, the
Okay.
podcast is called Honestly, and it's Selena Zito. She's, I
Okay.
think, maybe works for the Washington Examiner,
I'm gonna
but I
check that
could be.
out.
She was 4 feet away, and there are pictures of her with a Secret Service guy on top of her covering her up. So she was like damn close.
All right.
All
Well,
right,
we'll wrap this up. Check us out. We're new on TikTok. I'm gonna start uploading clips there at the Eleemosynary Moment. We're
the
both
Red
anti
Chinese.
TikTok, but this is how we're gonna get into China. We're gonna break in there, steal their data for once. Just kidding.
Ha
All right, buddy. I'll see you later.
Bye.
Peace.